actually said the same thing when we were outside. So I don't know if you're saying anything about the trees or anything, but
Well, put it down. You know, we had a arborist that came out on Saturday, charged us $900, came out and did a fantastic job. We have 150 or 170-year-old pygmy hickory out there that the Indians used to
oh, I
plant.
read about that. Okay.
We've got the other memorial tree out there for the servicemen that died at Pearl Harbor. So if you want to put that on that piece of paper, and if you don't feel comfortable with you saying it, I'll be glad to do it. Yes.
Okay, well, I don't feel
You just write it.
around the front.
Okay, so which button do I push? You can push the side arrow. That will go to the next screen. You want to go back. That mic's hot.
Mike's up.
Where's I need a seat for him too.
Yeah, we can get another chair. Good to see you. Thank you.
Okay, sir, how would you like this? I've got everybody around,
Right
so.
here.
Okay.
Get one more chair.
These are the ones that used to be our permanent lunch break. Now we got the benches.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out this evening. Thank you for coming out this evening. We appreciate the dialogue that we've gotten so far. We appreciate the passion that you have behind the city of Bradenton and the school system that we've all gone through. I'd like to do a couple of things just to kind of framework the evening. I'd like to introduce Superintendent Mills, also talk a little bit about the park very briefly. As you came in this evening, we had some forms to fill out for questions. When you get those filled out, I'll be taking them at this table where the microphone is. That's just so we can go through the questions to make sure we're not duplicating those questions. I will call your name, and if you'd like to come up and ask the question yourself, you are welcome to do that. If you'd rather me or someone else ask the question, we will gladly do that as well. This is an open forum. It is for us to learn where we are as a school system and to have come to some type of ideas and conclusions to help get us where we want to go. We are all in this together.
Mr. Hartzell?
Yes.
I was under the impression that we would be able to get public comment.
Well,
By the time the questions, and that's what I thought we were coming to.
well, it is a public forum. It is for you to voice whatever questions, concerns that you have. But instead of having everybody stand up and say something, what we wanted to do was go through those questions, and if there were multiple questions, if you could get your question answered, there's no reason to stand up with that question. As we go throughout the evening, as the information is given, I've got some more blanks on my table, and there are blanks at the tables in the back. Feel free to ask questions as we go through the evening as well.
What I thought was that you had a forum to share ideas and to clarify and to bring some of these people are new to the community.
I have no issue with that happening.
Yeah.
I have no issue with us doing that.
So as we go through the evening, if you'd like to make a comment or have your question asked. If we don't get to your question, feel free to raise your hand and we'll give the floor to you. If you have a question that we're running through the evening, if you would like someone to come get it for you or from you, if you don't want to stand up and walk up, we can do that as well. Okay?
Sure.
I would say so, yes. Would you like to do that now?
I'm happy to lead it.
Okay.
Please
Please
stand.
stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, I think we all know why we're here this evening. We're here for, this is government action at its finest. We are here to engage and talk about ideas that we can come up with to help the school board get where they need to go. We want open dialogue. We encourage that. To just kind of framework why we're here tonight, the property that we're sitting on right now was given to the school board in the late 1940s by Dr. William Daniel Sugg. He was committed to the community by donating his time and his money. His contributions include, he was one of the founders of the South Florida Museum. He was president of the Kiwanis Club. He was president of the Chamber of Commerce. He helped establish the DeSoto Memorial and the DeSoto Parade. He was a VP of Manatee Historical Society. He assisted in the development of Manatee Memorial Hospital. He was the founder of the West Coast Symphony. He was founder of the Osceola Opera Guild. He was a founding trustee of New College of Florida. He was chairman of the board of Ringling Museum of Art. He's regarded as one of Manatee County's most influential leaders. He received an A.H. Robbins Award from the Florida Medical Society for outstanding service by a physician to his community. He was awarded the Encomienda de Dona Isabel la Católica, that's Spain's highest honor to a non-Spanish person. And he was honored with Manatee County's Distinguished Citizens Award. He donated the property with the intent for it to be used as a school and a park. Mr. Mills, our current superintendent, served as a chief executive officer of Minneapolis school system. Prior to becoming a CEO of Minneapolis, he served 10 years in Chicago Public Schools. Prior to working with Chicago Public Schools, he had a notable 24-year-plus career in the United States Army. His educational backgrounds include a master's in business from Webster, a master's in national security affairs from the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Barry Dunn, the principal of Miller Elementary.
Thank you.
Mr. Hartsaw did explain the process and that there are cards that you can fill out. I just want to remind everyone that we are going to give people a chance to talk, but to keep it so that we are respecting the speaker, whoever that may be at the time, and that we're listening to what they have to say, and know that you will have a voice when it's your turn. And so this is, you know, obviously, like Mr. Hartsaw said, we're all in this together. We want to do what's best for the school system, and let's keep this as respectful as we can. I know there's a lot of passion out there about what's going on, and so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Mills, who Mr. Hartsaw did such a fine job of giving you a little bit of background on him. And we welcome you to Miller, sir, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to be here this evening with all of you. And as it was said already, and I'd like to reiterate it, this is government participation in the process in its finest. And I really believe that coming out and meeting with the community, engaging the community, has been very much a priority for me as a superintendent and our board, so that we can collaborate and collectively and mutually move forward with any solutions or challenges that we have as a school district. And so tonight I'm going to share many of those challenges with you, and then we'll move into questions, we'll move into ideas and solutions. But my ultimate goal from the meeting tonight with this great community here is to see how we can collectively and collaboratively come up with a win-win scenario. And that's ultimately what I would like to see us accomplish tonight. But I think there's a lot of information that you may or may not understand, and the challenges of the school district that have driven us to having to look at these possible considerations around our fiscal challenges as a school district. I want to personally thank Barry Dunn, our principal here, for hosting this, his assistant principal, Yvette Benton, our chair, our SAC chair, Mike Hartzaw, and the entire Miller Elementary faculty and staff for hosting this event tonight as we come together and work on and come to solutions. I will just share with you that in my bio, you know that I spent 24 plus years in the military. And I spent 24 years defending our democracy, our Constitution, and the rights of our citizens of this country. And tonight, again, is all how I respect and understand and value community input, participation, and engagement in the governing process. And here tonight to hear your concerns, your ideas, and solutions around the challenges that face us as a school district. So it was my privilege to serve 24 years. I've served 13 years in public education, so I've committed my entire career life in public service. And I'm very, very proud of that, and I'm very, very honored to have had the opportunity to do that. I'm very honored to serve as your superintendent here in Manatee County. At our last board meeting 3 weeks ago, it was a board workshop, and one of the agenda items was this parcel of property here for general discussion and public notice that was a situation that we were considering as a leadership team. 2 weeks later at the board meeting, many of your community members came and spoke candidly about their concerns, which has brought us here tonight to have further discussion and collaboration and cooperation to find that win-win scenario I'd like to see us come to terms with tonight. So that's the purpose of the meeting tonight. I know most of you, if not all of you, are here in some capacity to save your park or save our park. And I understand that, I very much respect that, but I also need to let you know that I respect it and understand that and support that in the perspective as a superintendent, but I'm also going to tell you I'm here to save the school district. And we have some really significant challenges that I will share with you this evening. It may enlighten you why we've come to the conclusion that we have to get to these hard choices we may have to make. And we will make them together, and we will make them collaboratively. This is one community of hundreds of communities in Manatee County, and as a superintendent and as the Board of Education, we have a responsibility to each community as well as all the hundreds of communities, our 46,000 students, our 53 schools, our 11 charter schools. So we have to find ways to come together that meet the needs of the school district, and hopefully we can balance that with the needs of communities. So again, that's why we're here this evening. So I want to take about 5 minutes and kind of lay the framework of why this was a possible consideration that has yet to be brought before the board for vote and consideration in that capacity. I want to give you a financial overview of where we're at. And so if I'm referring you to the slides to my left and right. During that period of 2009 to 2013, we overspent our budget by $38 million. The past 2 years, we have not balanced our budget to the tune of $4.5 million for 2012, and for 2013, $8.5 million. So last year, we were $8.5 million in the red when we closed our books in June. Beyond the $8.5 million, we were forced to a situation because of the financial dire straits we were in, was that we had to go out and ask the schools for support for borrowing $1.5 million, and you may recall that, because we had very much legitimate concerns about our fiscal nature and state in closing out the year. So the $8.5 million is actually compounded to $10 million. This fiscal year, when we close out in June, we are projecting an $8.2 million surplus in our budget towards our fund balance. That would represent a $17 million turnaround from last year's budget, which has very much has been our focus as a senior leadership team and as a board to be able to restore fiscal health to this district. but we will not meet the 3% by the state statute and state mandate. So that will mean that this school district will be 6 years in a row where we have failed to be compliant with the state statute. Right now, we're behind in our funding for our buildings, for capital renewal and capital maintenance. Just to give you an understanding, capital maintenance is maintaining your air conditioning units in your buildings. Capital renewal would be the replacement of that whenever they go out beyond their life cycle. Right now, we're $10 million behind in funding that. And that will only grow wider unless we find a way to close that gap in outlying years. Last year, coming on board, we had to build a $21 million fiscal recovery plan that was informally monitored by the state. And the purpose of that $21 million was to restore the $8.5 million, $10 million I just mentioned, and to put aside $10.3 million for our fund balance for this year. The senior leadership team in the school district, 80% of the folks in the senior leadership team in our district are new to the district. And they've worked very diligently and hard to restore the fiscal soundness of our budget and to restore that fund balance and to preclude us from coming in overspent this year. That fiscal recovery plan that I just mentioned included many components on this slide and beyond, which has been monitored informally by a team designated by the state that came in and helped us craft that. And you may recall the report that they posted last spring about the state of our business and operations of the school district. And these were many of the things that we had to implement to get to that $21 million. There are many more things on there, but I wanted to highlight these items. So I want to just share with you on this slide that we've been very, very successful this year in meeting what we promised the community, the board, and our employees of restoring fiscal soundness to our school district. We were about 2.8% to the 3% that we needed to meet the statute on our fund balance of $10.3 million. And we're projecting that surplus right now that was just recently confirmed by this team from the state that would be $8.2 million. Now, I have information now that wasn't available and is going to be public, or has been in the last day or two, to our board, to our employees. But we've been engaging in conversations since our audit findings that were posted in December and January. The district was audited by the state for almost 7 months last year, from March to November. And every third year, a school district is audited by the state. In the other 2 years, it's an external audit done by the district. Well, our year by the state was last year. They were actually on site when I came here at the end of March, and they audited us through the October-November timeframe. Out of that audit, there were 42 findings that were found in the category of federal funding, operational funding, and financial funding. And those 42 findings represented a potential of $10 million of penalties and fines to be assessed to us by the state. And we have been working with the state diligently since those audit findings were posted and presented to the state and to the Joint Audit Legislative Committee that our board chair and I had the opportunity to go up and talk to in presentation in January about the concerns of the fiscal state of our school district. And I will tell you, it was a very uncomfortable position to be in, to hear the Auditor General talk about these 42 findings, the potential fines of $10 million plus, as well as that we are a school district that are unique and alone in how poorly we've managed our budget in the past. No other school district has ever found itself in the position that we're in now. In fact, the Auditor General presented to the Joint Oversight Committee that only 2 other school districts have ever not achieved their fund balance for more than 1 year. We're on our 6th year. So we have some real challenging times. Why am I sharing that? Because we have been working diligently with the state around those audit findings, around those potential fines and penalties. And in recent conversations, we are very alarmed and concerned that we might not be able to get any relief from those, and we may end up paying the entire amount. And what happens to that is that the $8 million surplus that we've worked very hard for would be completely wiped out for this fiscal year, and we would actually come in at a negative again for our third year in a row. That's why I'm saying that I understand you being here is about saving McKelvey Park, but I am very, very concerned as superintendent and focused with the board in saving our school district. I'd just like to highlight on this slide that if that comes to fruition and we are penalized as such, we are susceptible or vulnerable to going from an informal monitoring by the state to a formal monitoring process where the state would assign and designate a team to come down here monthly to work with the board and me in an oversight capacity in recommending what the board approves around HR, finances, etc. That is not a situation that I would like to be in as a superintendent, and I don't think anybody here would like to see that happen. But that is the next potential step. And that is what we are facing right now, and is very much a realistic possibility. I've heard from the community, both in emails, phone calls, and I appreciate this, I certainly do. That's government. That's participating. And we need to do more of that as a nation. And so I'm very impressed by this community and reaching out via email, phone calls, through community opportunities to come to board meetings, to share your concerns, because that's exactly what this nation's about. So that said, in those comments and emails, I've heard about selling other properties. And I wanted to highlight with you that we have sold several properties in the last year to meet that fiscal recovery plan. I think someone mentioned about over at MTI Braden River, that 10 acres. We closed on that on the 28th of May. Okay? When I got here, I in-processed in the day before I took my oath, and I went over to the HR annex there, that building off to the side there on the old Checkers property. And one of the first questions I asked, because I had already been through the administrative building, is why do we have this building here with 16 or 18 folks? Why are we keeping it open? Why are we paying to keep it open? And why are we not selling this property? We sold the property. We moved the HR team back into the main building because we had capacity there to do it. We sold a corner parcel of Bayshore with that State Road 70 Caruso property that I mentioned will close. As a result of selling properties this year, we're looking at, I believe, $4.9 million to go towards restoring our fiscal soundness as a school district. Last year, we sold the IMC property, which is a property that was adjacent to Orange Ridge Elementary School. So we are looking at what properties do we absolutely need and what properties are available for consideration by the board, by the public, by the community to help us get there to where we need to go. Right now, we have two properties currently for sale, the Parrott Information Center and a property out in Ellenton. Neither one of those are properties that we can use in capacity of building additional schools on. And we have to retain properties here large enough to build an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. And those are different size acreages. And in working with the county administrator, working with the community, working with all the builders and developers here, we are going to see growth in Manatee County, and we're going to see it in certain areas in the county, and I am projecting that we will have to build additional schools to meet that growth. And I'm going to move forward with an RFP to bring in a third-party expertise team to look at this county across the board on where is our growth, where is our demographics of mobility, et cetera, where is our shift, where is our boundaries and districts for all our schools. Because I've looked at all the boundaries for our schools, and the boundaries we have right now need to be addressed. And many of them were created in 2006 and no longer meet the needs of our school district. We have large growth of population on Lakewood Ranch in Ellenton Parish area. We're projecting we're going to have to build more schools to meet that growth. But I want to commission a team of experts to come in and come to the board, come to the community, and say, this is our analysis, this is where you're going to see growth, this is where you see a lack of growth, and you may want to consider even closing schools if you have to save costs. but this is where you're going to have to build schools. But I need a team that comes in and works with our team to make that presentation to the board and to the community. So again, we can all come together and collectively sort out and figure out what we want to do as a school district to move forward to meet the challenges. Let me back up. When I came here last spring, I had a 100-day entry plan, and my goal was to speak to every employee in the district, go to every school, talk to all the staff and faculties, get out and engage the community, get out and talk to our elected officials, talk to other key people, get known in the community. In the process of doing that, I heard a resounding theme from all our employees. Low morale, particularly around low pay, pay cuts, reductions in cost of us paying for health care. I heard low morale as a resounding one. It didn't take us long to figure out that our IT system in the school district is 8 to 10 years old. It's antiquated, and we have hardware systems now in place that we can't even use current software on it because it doesn't have the capacity to be uploaded. We got significant challenges there. We have to find a way to maintain our buildings. We have wonderful facilities in Manatee County. One of the things I was very impressed with from an architectural standpoint is this county has done a great job of rebuilding modern schools in the county, and it's something that the county should be very proud of. We need to reinvest back into our employees. One of the things that we did, and it was a high-risk kind of thing in a state of the fiscal nature that we were in as a school district, but we took the money we got from the state to fund the teacher increases. We funded $6.3 million of increases for our teachers. We were one of the first counties in the state of Florida to negotiate a contract and pay that increase for our teachers. We still have counties today who haven't done that in Florida. We also, in our other bargaining unit, negotiated a contract and a pay increase for them because we have struggling employees here that we need to reinvest back into. And so I made a commitment as superintendent to reinvest back into our employees and find a way to raise those salaries. High risk, but very much deserving and worthy of doing so. Our problem in the future will be how can we sustain those kinds of increases, because the state funding we receive now will only sustain the increase we gave last year for our teachers. And then, most importantly, we are faced with the potential scenario next week of trying to find $10 or $11 million to pay back the penalties from the audit findings from last year and years beyond. So, in the interest of finding a win-win scenario and coming here tonight and hear your ideas and suggestions and your concerns, how can we collectively save this property that meets the needs of the community, but more importantly, how can we come together and save this school district? That's the mission tonight that I think that we all have, and I appreciate everybody being here tonight because we have to do this together. Okay? So what I put up here are options. None of them are any decided options, but for considerations for dialogue and discussion. We don't have to solve this tonight. We don't have to resolve this tonight. Any benefit to be gained from any sale of the property at this point, no matter where in the district, will be too late to be included in our fiscal year this year. This would have to be something that would be carried over next year to hopefully offset our need to find that $7 or $8 million if we're penalized on the fines. And how are we going to solve that problem? We need to solve it together. And that's why I'm here tonight. Option number one, keep the park as is. Option number two was something that's been discussed in the past, and I'll talk about that more. 3, let's see if we can work with our county and the city of Bradenton to have them take the park and retain it, and the integrity of the park, and find even ways maybe even to expand on the park itself. And then the third option, which was discussed at the board meeting or the board workshop, is number 4. Let's talk about this for a moment, because I'm asking the community to try to help me out to find more money to cover those potential penalties and still maintain the integrity of the park. The parcel that you see up here was once discussed some time ago. What I would suggest that if we considered this option together, that this represents 1 acre of 3 acres. It is actually the most valuable piece of the property, the 3 acres. We may get anywhere from $1.2 to $1.4 million for that parcel. We could agree to sell it, and obviously how it would be used, I've heard strip malls talked about or whatever. That's just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, because whoever we sell it to is going to have to go to the city of Bradenton and get it approved, because it's single residence property, special purpose property. So the city would have to determine how that's approved for what purpose. But if we look at this, I've heard concerns about safety of our students. That is paramount to me as superintendent. So what we could look at doing if that parcel was sold was to make the access to the parcel from the parking lot from Publix and keep the integrity of the trees in the front along the sidewalk there in the front on Manatee Avenue. In doing that, we can put up an 8-foot fence that you can't see through along the entire property line for restricted access to and from that property from the rest of the property in the park. We could even look at creating access routes to and from Manatee Avenue on both sides of that parcel, to the east and to the west. This could all be done in an agreement of how we would go together if this was an option considered and supported by the community. I would, as superintendent, recommend to the board that we could possibly use a small portion of the proceeds from that sale to further develop the remainder of the park to how you would like to see it developed. That is a viable option. Why? It allows the park to still be retained. It allows the park to maintain the green frontage along Manatee Avenue. The access would be from Publix in from the side there on the east. We would restrict access to that property with an 8-foot wall, and I think we even had a picture of that. And we can share that with you if you'd like to see it. I think that's a possible win-win scenario. And of course, when you look at this scenario, that is the 3 acres. That is really not a feasible option for us at this time. Why? Because this is not what you want. You want a park. I'm trying to look for a win-win. I'm going to open it up for questions. Who's moderating the questions?
Yes, I will.
Let me, if I could, I want to introduce my team. I got to tell you, we got a rock star team. Diana Green, our deputy superintendent for instructional services. Don Hall, our deputy superintendent for business and operations. Michael Boyer, our CFO, and Mike Penley, who works in our facilities and properties. Please, I'm ready. We're ready to answer your questions or share what your ideas are.
I'll take the questions here. What I'll do is I'll call your name, and if you'd like to come up and answer or ask the question yourself, we welcome that. If for whatever reason you don't want to ask your question, I'll be happy to read it for you. As we go along, if you have any other questions that come up and give us another sheet. We'll stay here until everybody feels like they have their questions answered. So and this is in no particular order. We did take a few questions out that had already been answered. If you don't feel, if your question is not answered and you don't feel like it has been answered, please let us know. We're here to serve everybody. Mr. Tom Sprenger, would you like to? I'll give you that, sir. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Tom Sprenger. I've been a resident of Manatee County for 53 years. I served on this school board from 1967 to 71, and 2 years I was chairman of that board. I've had nightmares when I was on the board that we might go through something like you have gone through, and I do appreciate what you have done in trying to get this thing back in order, and it has to be done. But I have to say, I do urge you to save this park, save next to the Jesse P. Miller School. It's pristine. It's pristine, and once it's gone, you'll never get it back. I don't know whether we need to get our state legislature to do something for us, but there must be someone in Tallahassee in the State Department of Education could understand what you've gone through here to try to put this thing back together. And I think that we should get some help to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just briefly reiterate, right now I'm asking us to consider option 2 and 3. We maintain the integrity of the park. We sell a parcel of 1 acre off. We keep two acres. We develop the park even more. We address any concerns around safety and security. The other option is a viable option too, but I don't want to speak on behalf of our fellow government elected officials at the county and the city of Bradenton, but that, I believe, is an option too. So I appreciate your addressing that, sir. And I too would like to find a win-win where we keep the park in some capacity.
Jeremy Webster.
Yes, I'm Jeremy. Have you ever thought of doing a district-wide fundraiser to raise money to not have to sell the park?
We've looked at just about every option that's viable. We came up with a $21 million fiscal turnaround plan that was approved by the state, was approved by the board. It didn't include fundraisers, but we have organizations that we work with around that, such as the Manatee Education Foundation, et cetera, which share and help fund our school district around our initiatives. But the plan that we have in place is a realistic plan around the recovery of those $21 million around those areas that I mentioned. But a very good question, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Gene Gallo.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for the opportunity that you've brought to us, Superintendent, that we may be able to stand, sit, and talk about what we're going to do at Jesse P. Miller. Jesse P. Miller was built in 1951, and I'm going to give you credit and assume that you and Mr. Randbar were not even born at that time.
I was born much later there,
Okay.
Mr. Commissioner.
I'm going to wear 2 hats tonight. One of them I'm going to speak as Gene Gallo. The other one I will speak as a city councilman for the city of Bradenton. And I will let you know when I'm speaking for the city of Bradenton. I would like just take one quick second to get a hand raised to find out the flavor of the crowd, see how many people are opposed to the sale of the park. And so I guess I'm speaking to the right group. I want to be, at my age, I have to be sure.
Can I ask a question? How many are opposed to coming up with a win-win for this district so we can save the district?
Okay, I will put my City of Bradenton hat on, and I'm looking at the options that you have proposed. And I say this in somewhat jest, but in fact that the City of Bradenton is not like the federal government. We're not here to bail out failed corporations. We cannot do that. If you live in the City of Bradenton, you have 3 taxes on your tax bill. You pay the school tax, the county tax, and then you pay a city tax, which is actually the government that provides the service for you where you live. We pay the school tax because we've all had children in school and we want to continue to do that. And we pay the county tax because the state says we have to. We don't like it. But now, this past year, the city taxpayers, besides paying their city tax besides paying their school board tax, have put almost $250,000 into the school system up and above through our government. And as you're aware, that is for the SROs at the high schools, that's for school crossing guards. And it's my understanding that the school board is going to request that we come up with 3 more officers, which will then, if we approve that, the city taxpayers will put almost $500,000 into the school system next year, up and above their city taxes. So we're pretty strapped. We've had problems just like you folks. We've had to be able to run a tight government and tight ship. We've had to raise taxes. When we see it, we do it. That's the way it's got to be done. Now I'll go back to being me and talk about this area here. I've been a resident of this county for 60 years. I might be a little bit older than you, I'm not sure. But I graduated from Manatee High School. I've had 2 daughters graduate from Manatee High School. I have a grandson graduating from Manatee High School and another grandson that will graduate from Manatee in about 6 years. I'm vested in this county. I'm vested and interested in the school system. I hope to live long enough to see everything happen to my grandkids because they got educated in one of the finest districts in the state of Florida. Dealing with budgets, and I have to admit, I don't deal with the size budget that you have, but we deal with a tough budget also. And the problem that you have, in my eyes, cannot be fixed by selling property, getting a one-shot amount of money. You have a bloodletting in this budget that must be fixed. You've got to come up with a solution that is going to generate revenue year after year after year up and above what you have right now. And I don't believe you can do that by selling off property. First of all, this is not.
Mr. Gallo, are you suggesting a property tax increase?
If you have to, be man enough to do it. I've done it. I've done it for several years. That's what my job is. This is not my first rodeo, Mr. Mills. You're not going to worry me by asking me that question.
No, I just wanted
Because
clarity.
I'm going to be honest and tell you, if it takes the city of Bradenton to raise taxes, we vote for it. We raised them last year. You know what? We didn't have the first person come up and raise Cain with us because they want that service. This property out here is not surplus property. This property was developed because we built a new school and we had all those things south of here and they were supposed to be moved over here. Surplus property means it's not being used. Come by here during the day and see the children out there, the tranquility that they receive from sitting out there. With all these new tests and hard tests that these kids are going to be taking, they need an area like that to go out and clear their minds and see what God has got out there in the planet waiting on them. Now, I know I don't have a lot of time. I had planned on speaking for at least an hour and a half. But finally, I would like to say, and this is food for thought for the people in this room, and it's not going to be popular with the folks that are sitting up there. If the board is going to ignore this community and the needs of the children, it's Jesse P. Miller, maybe we should recognize what Rowlett Elementary has done and see about converting it to a charter school, and then you got charge of your school. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindley Clark. I'll stand right here next to you. Lindley would like to ask, it doesn't matter how much money it takes. Why would they take away the feeling of safety of my brother and my friends?
I'm sorry, what was your name, young lady?
Lindley.
Lindley? That's a good question, Lindley. We would not do anything in this school district to put any of our students in any peril. As again I said, safety and security and welfare of our students, our employees, is paramount to me as a superintendent and to our board. So we would not allow that to happen.
Walter Miller.
Thank you. And I certainly concur with you. You have gathered a fine group of people to work with you. I've been impressed. As many of you know, but you may not, I was the assistant superintendent here from 1979 to 1995. And before I make my remarks, I would like to ask, I see David, I saw Mrs. Ranabar, I think I saw Barbara Harvey. Are the other board members here?
I'll take the opportunity to introduce our board members that are present tonight. We have our board chair, Julia Ranabar. We have our vice chair, Dave Watchdog Minor. And we have board member Barbara Harvey. She's back there. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for reminding me that.
Yeah, okay. My comments are divided into 4 sections. The school system and parks, historically. Property that the school system has sold over the years. My feeling as a citizen of the city of Bradenton, or a taxpayer, regarding paying for this property again after I've already paid for it, and the most important part of it, safety, and my perspective on the safety of the children. And I'm going to read this statement, and if I go beyond the time, please tell me. I came to Manatee County in 1979 to assume the position of Assistant Superintendent for Non-Instructional Services. One of the first people I met was the first ever County Administrator, David Collier. We talked at length at his home one evening about the lack of adequate parks, swimming pools, soccer fields, etc. Working as partners, the school board went on to work to obtain funding for G.T. Bray Park of about $4.5 million, Blackstone Park in Palmetto about $3 million, Whitfield Park south of Abel Elementary, and several smaller parks. The school board currently holds 40-year leases, and being the folks are new, they may not be aware of this, 40-year leases on all of these parks that I just mentioned. And it's hard to believe that we're approaching the end of these leases. They have about 10 years to go, I believe. In fact, I would hope the board would consider whether they need to build an on-campus baseball facility for Manatee High and tennis courts in their capital plan. I believe Manatee is the only high school without its own baseball and tennis facility on campus. Don't forget that Miller has long had tennis courts on his property and used to have handball, racquetball facilities on the southern edge of its property. So there's a long precedent in this community of the school board being a partner in park. In fact, I've heard people say, and I personally would agree with this 100%, without the school board, we would not have parks for our children. When I came here in '79, we had adult softball, and the interesting thing to me was when we got that $4.5 million to build G.T. Bray, it was very interesting that certain of the city fathers fought us, and the reason is they wanted to sell off that land or part of it to gain more revenue, somewhat of a similar situation that we're faced with today. Now, let's look at some of the mistakes that have been made by the board in selling or trading property. And I say mistakes because it is too easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. Remember when the board tried to sell what is now Lincoln Park, many of you may not know that, for building of a tomato packing plant. The community rose up in opposition, and we now today on that site have the beautiful Lincoln Park adjacent to Lincoln Middle School. We know where King Middle School sits today. The board bought that property a number of years ago, and then they sold it because they didn't think they would need it and they needed money. They then had to buy the same piece of property back at a considerable expense to taxpayers. The board owned the property where MTI and Braden River High School sit and traded it and wound up buying it back for $12 million. And I participated very actively in that purchase. And probably the poorest decision was selling the property where Champs headquarters sits today, and then having to buy the Checkers property and the PIC Center, or the Parent Information Center, on Manatee Avenue when we had growth. I think it's enough to say, no matter how financially strained you are, please look to the future. And you mentioned tonight the capital needs that we're going to be facing over the next number of years. And I hope that some of this money, if there is money generated enough from property, I hope that we will use it to build our capital facilities, whether it be our IT program or whether it be new schools. And when I read about Preston Whiting developing 75th and Cortez, I realize that we're going to have a big impact on the west side. We thought everything had moved to the east, I believe. So as you can see, the school board has a long history of being involved in parks. As for this park, as a resident, I've already paid my school tax, and we paid my school tax and your school tax to enhance that piece of property out there, which we then dedicated in reference to Mr. McKelvey being an outstanding teacher for a number of years at Miller. And the fourth and final thing is safety. Now let's turn to the safety of children. Harry Canan, Chuck Banks, and others did an excellent job as a design team in eliminating or reducing the safety concerns for children that the former school presented. Remember, Mrs. Harvey, the concerns you often voiced about children being taken by non-custodial parents? The drunk man you called me about who was sleeping on the property at Miller School during school hours? The concern that Walgreens across the street was going to have a liquor store in their facility. I could go on. However, you know, Chuck and Barbara, how many safety concerns were addressed in this beautiful new facility. And in talking to Harry Canan yesterday, he said, as a member of the design team, leaving the buffer, which became dedicated in Coach McKelvey's honor, was to provide a safety buffer. My final concern is the use of capital money for the general fund issues. It may not be legal, and I will address that at a future board meeting.
It's actually legal. It's been approved by the state.
Well, I would like to see that in writing.
Sure.
And get the citations, because I have talked to the Auditor General's office, the Office of Educational Facilities, and the Office of Finance, and they have given me legal citations that govern all of that. And I would be happy, and one of the things that will be favorable, and I probably shouldn't say this tonight, since there's so many people saying save the park, since you have researched the history of this property and it was donated, that makes it where it would be possible to put it into the general fund. But if capital funds were used to purchase property, I'm not so sure.
No, you're absolutely right about that. You're right about that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
It's how the property was purchased.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, if I could, before the next question, I want to thank Mr. Gallo and Mr. Miller for their comments, and I would like to just kind of talk about 2 points that I think they adeptly made. One is that we are in fiscal dire straits. There's no doubt about that. The issue about a potential property tax increase, I think, is very much at the forefront that we need to be looking at as a county. I'm not sure when, but that's something we need to consider. Sarasota County, which is one of the highest performing school districts in the state of Florida, has almost $40 million of additional funding because of their millage increase than we do, and they have 11,000 less students. We also have, when I'm looking at this study that will be done, what are our capital outlay needs for the growth that we're going to see both east of I-75 that we know, plus the southwest corridor of Bradenton area. How are we going to meet the demands around the growth and increase of student population? We need to get out in front of that. And so that's why I'm very proactive in doing that. But with the capital outlay plan that will come out of that, obviously looking at the extension of the sales tax of 2017 is critical to that. So they've made very good points around that for all of us to consider and think about of how do we provide the best quality education for our students in Manatee County. So thank you for those comments.
Ms. Julia Ackles.
Okay, I have two questions, or actually, one's a statement.
Well, then I'll only need one answer.
Well, I can give you the fast one. I spent a lot of time yesterday in the Carnegie Library, which is our historical library now, and I also went to the public library and did some research on the school system, Jesse P. Miller, Dr. Sugg, and just all kinds of things in the Eaton room. And also I used the microfilm for the time of the purchase, which was 1950. You made a statement about that we are unique in that we are in so much debt and we had so many problems. I did make a notation on, I did not bring that piece of paper with me, but I do know that according to the Bradenton Herald in 1950, Calhoun County, which would be Panama City, failed to balance their budget and they were running at a deficit. So, of course, that was 1950, and I don't recall the dollar amounts. I don't even know if they put the dollar amounts in there, but it was reported in the paper. So I don't know who told you that we were unique. I know you're reporting on what you were told, but I found one instance, and I'm sure if I went and did more research, maybe I could find more.
The Auditor General made that statement to the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee.
Okay, well, I got proof, according to the Bradenton Herald, that that's inaccurate. Okay, we gave you a petition from the retired educators at the board meeting on Tuesday, this past Tuesday. And then I also went to the Garden Club meeting on Wednesday, the following day, and I got some signatures, and I also got some signatures from my neighborhood. Are you going to honor these petitions and the petition that were online from like hundreds of signatures that we've gotten over the past week, and the fact that they're against you selling this property?
Well, let me ask you this. Tonight was about coming together and having feedback and input, so I'm not ready at this point to make a commitment around that, because although this is a wonderful turnout, there are 300,000 citizens in the county.
And some of the members that signed here are from all over the county.
I understand that, ma'am.
They're from
All I'm saying
out
is
east.
that at this point, I can't make that commitment, okay?
So you're not ready to make that commitment, is that correct?
But I am willing to say this: if we can't come away with a win-win, what is the point in moving forward? So.
Well, I agree. We need to have a win-win, and you asked us at the meeting, all of us that had come and talked to the board, if we would meet with your liaison and come together with some ideas of. I have not been called in a week, and I checked with the other people, and they said they had not been called either.
She's asking why the task force that we created, Parent Task Force, hasn't reached out to the group.
We forwarded everything to the Parent Task Force. We passed everything on.
Have they reached out to the community members here?
Yeah,
Well, you need to follow that up, because I made a commitment on that.
they were provided everything. They were provided everyone's contact.
Please follow that up, Steve. I'm sorry about that.
Well, I just
When
wanted
I make
to let
a commitment, I honor it.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, because we are willing to come in and take time. I know a lot of parents of the students, they can't be there, they're working, but
If I may, ma'am.
several of us retired teachers are willing to, and we also know the school, the point of view as well, because, you know, so I think we would be good people to come up with ideas that you might consider.
I would welcome that. That's why I brought that up after the board workshop or during the break, What she's talking about is we have enhanced parental involvement in our district twofold. One, every month we have a community forum for the SAC chairs to come and meet with myself and my team, and we update those members of the SAC chairs on all the initiatives going on. We get feedback, input, questions answered. Then from that, we evolved even to a higher level of engagement by creating this parent task force. They actually have an office on the first floor in our building. There are 6 parents representative of schools, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools around the county that are here to see and help us get better at engaging and leveraging the capacity of our parents in the education process. That's what she's referencing.
Mr. Mills, is that forum always going to be out east now?
No, we move it around. The first couple were at Manatee High School. The last one was at Lakewood Ranch. Where's the next one, Steve?
Hale Middle School. The SAS people pick the location.
But it's well publicized. I highly encourage, it's not just limited to the SAC chairs. Any parents can come, but it is a great 90-minute, 2-hour forum to update the parents on what's going on, to engage the parents and get feedback and ideas and suggestions, and to answer questions. They've been very successful, and I've enjoyed every one of them, and I feel those in attendance get a lot out of it. I know so because they've told me that.
Mr. Jack Hawkins.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name's Jack Hawkins. I live in the city of Bradenton. I am not a parent of a child that goes to Jesse P. Miller. I did attend Jesse P. Miller in 1959 when Bob McKelvey was here as a coach. My kids graduated from Jesse P. Miller when Bob McKelvey was a coach. I grew up 8 blocks to the west. I've lived 8 blocks to the east all my life. I do have a question, Mr. Mills. I tried to noodle around on Google to find out what the annual budget for the school board is. How much is it annually?
Well, the guy over here can give us right down to the penny is Michael. What is it, Michael? $568 million. $568 million.
That's what I read, but I wasn't sure. So I'm opposed to selling this park for $1.8 million. I can't do I tried to do the math on my computer. I couldn't. I think $1.8 million is about 0.003% of the budget, thereabouts. If we just went for 10 years, and if the budget remained level for 10 years, I'm thinking that's $5.6 billion over 10 years, if my math's right. So $1.8 million infusion in the budget divided by $5.6 billion, I think I agree with Mr. Gallo. That's really not going to solve the problem that the school board has today. And that's all I have to say.
If I could, I'm in total agreement that this potential surplus and sale would in no way help us long term. That is not the purpose. And just for clarity, $1.8 million of a $8 or $9 million unanticipated shortfall in next year's budget would make a huge difference and would be about 25% of that shortfall. That's what I'm just saying.
Mr. Chris Peters.
Thank you. My name is Chris Peters. My question is regarding the financial recovery plan. If this year alone, the recovery plan was able to recoup $20+ million from last year's financial debacle, why wouldn't we assume that moving forward, that $20+ million that has gone to pay off all the previous debt is then going to become a surplus
You're absolutely
to
right.
be used going forward, so that a $1.8 million sale of a property becomes pretty much a moot point?
Right. I'm going to answer that question because that's a very good question. And I have a very good answer for it. We are required to maintain 3% on our fund balance every year by state statute. That represents about $10.3 million of our budget. Last year, We overspent our budget. I already said $8.5, $10 million. We had $0 in our fund balance. That's why we had to come up with a $20 million fiscal recovery plan. If we were not penalized the fines that I've mentioned earlier, we would have that surplus going into next year's budget to allocate into our strategic plan, to reinvest back into our employees, to even increase possibly our fund balance beyond the $10.3 million. That is very true. But when you take the fact that we have an $8.2 million surplus that we're projecting and a potential of $9 to $10 million, even more, of penalties from the audit, you've just eliminated the entire $8 million surplus, and now we've not balanced our budget for anywhere from $1 million to $3 million, which has to be made up off the top of next year's budget.
But again, with the savings that you've already put into the budget this year, that same financial plan moving forward should continually increase.
It would not increase.
Okay. Yeah, why
I'm
not?
going to have Don answer that.
Thanks a lot.
You're my financial guy.
The bottom line is, when you're talking about budget capacity is what you're talking about at this point. You're saying if we came up with $21 million worth of cuts, that should increase the budget capacity by $21 million moving forward. Well, it doesn't work that way. And partially it's because of the kind of cuts that were made. Some of the cuts are one-time, some of them are ongoing cuts. And so that eats into the $21 million right off the bat. Mr. Mills is right that, yes, we don't have to pay back the $9 million that we started in the deficit, but that $9 million is not there. It was never there. So that $9 million is not part of budget capacity. Even though there were cuts to get us there, that is not going to be able to replace that $9 million. Now we're talking about adding $10 million approximately in fines. That takes us back to about a $2 to $3 million deficit. So the $8 million that we saved, which would be budget capacity, is then wiped out by the fines. So starting next year, we would be starting from a deficit yet again, requiring new cuts. So the $21 million disappears when you look at it through that process. The budget capacity is honestly not there then.
I have one other question. This one is to the SAC committee.
He just thinks faster on his feet on finances than I do.
That's fine. Question for the SAC committee at Jesse P. As the oldest child of a two-parent family where both worked, I spent countless hours at this park with my brother and sister. How come this playground is not open to the general public like it was 10, 15 years ago? And if you're a member of the SAC committee and you voted to keep your park closed, how can you keep the public off of your playground and expect the public to support keeping a park out front?
Do you know anything about that, Mike?
We are currently working with Manatee County and reviewing every school and every park that they have in an effort to come up with a coordinated plan that would detail what the public is able to use at each of those facilities. We've been working on that. Daltrey was the first agreement that we entered into. There are a number of old agreements, but for the most part, it is left up to the school itself to administer whether or not the park is open to the public.
So that's a decision by the principal SAC?
At this point it is, yes.
Mrs. Ann Douglas.
My name's Ann Scheffler Douglas. I, like Jack Hawkins and Tom Harrison, started Jesse P. Miller in first grade in 1959. I went to Walker Junior High School. I went to Manatee High School. I went to Manatee Community College. I went to Florida State, and I went on to get my law degree, and I've been practicing law here for 37 years. Manatee County school system did a great job by me and a lot of my friends, and I thank them for it. And I feel for you all coming into such a horrible situation. Mr. McKelvey taught me how to high jump. He was a great man. I have a lot of wonderful memories coming to school here and playing in what they call the park, and which was the playground at the time. I'm against selling the park. A couple of questions I do have, though, is it sounds to me like even if we sell the park, we could still get fined the $10 million, and then we've sold it for what purpose?
To offset the cost of the fines and the deficit it'll create in our budget. And I've already said it's only a one-time kind of solution.
Right, I
but it
understand
then drives
that.
us to, as Don said, where are we going to find this additional money to cover that shortfall at this point?
Okay, but as the school system and the children coming in grows, and as our economy gets better, and I think, what are they called, FTIs, that the school pays, aren't we going to be or the state pays, aren't we going to be getting more money that will eventually take us out of the debt? Is the state going to come in and close us down next year because we don't give them their $10 million?
No, that's not going to happen.
Right.
They're not going to close us down.
What's the huge, humongous hurry?
What is the hurry? Where we're going to find the dollars to cover this significant shortfall, because we've already created a fiscal recovery plan of $20 million. We sold properties, we sold cars, we did other things that we've outlined on there.
And I understand
So
that.
we have a situation where we don't have a whole lot of wiggle room to find additional money in this budget coming up to cover that significant deficit that may be upon us next week. We laid out a budget that we were going to brief at a special board workshop next week, the business budget, but now we have to put that on hold till we find out if we have to go find $8 or $10 million now that wasn't there before. That's
Right.
really our dilemma.
I guess what I don't understand is why the public and the children have to suffer because of the mistakes of past school boards and past school administrators.
That's a good question.
Ms. Downey Walls? Oh, I'm sorry.
She asked you a question.
What's the question, ma'am, again? I thought it was more of a statement.
I heard a why at the beginning of it.
Why?
I just don't understand, why do we have to suffer
For the mistakes
for
of
the
the
mistakes
previous
of the
board.
past school board? Why can't we draw it out a few more years and see how we do it?
That's a good question, because if we are penalized, we have asked to work with the state not to be penalized the entire amount, but to defer it out in small amortized payments for outlying years so that we don't have to be in this situation. If the state could cooperate in doing that, and I'm not sure they can do that by statute, it would enable us to avoid a scenario that we find ourselves potentially in with trying now to find that money for next year's budget.
Ms. Downey
One of the
Walls?
other things I wanted to go ahead and add to that, because I think it's a great question, why the urgency? Well, as we've already said, this district has had a pattern of overspending its budget, and the state has not monitored properly. And we don't know why that is, but now they are paying attention. When we went to the Joint Legislative Committee, they asked, how could this school district get in this state? So now DOE is on the carpet to look at how to bring this district back into compliance. If we don't do something this year, are they going to come in? No, but we have already gone up one level in their remediation process. And so that's for this year. If we don't fix it again next year, it will go up another level. And that is a level we do not want to go to, because there are a lot of different possible consequences, including the state coming into running the school, including, and this is a quote, the potential of replacing your school board. The state has the authority to do that based on the financial. So when we talk about urgency, we're trying to keep the state out of here as much as possible, but the longer we go in this state of deficit, then the more critical the consequences are from the state.
That's a pretty thick stack still.
Ms. Downey Walls?
No, it's okay. I'm actually here speaking on behalf of my mother, Melinda Brown, who couldn't be here tonight. I attended Jessie P. Miller along with my other 3 siblings, and she was here throughout those years, in and out of the school helping and working. She wanted to remind everyone that 8 of the trees out there on that property were put up in '86 when the Challenger exploded, and we were here, and we were out in that field and watched that. My grandfather, Charlie Jones, came and planted 7 trees in their memorial. There's another tree out there for Officer Jeffrey Young, who passed away, and so there are memorial trees out there. The park is special and dear to my heart. Coach McKelvey is a wonderful man, and I submitted his name when they were looking for a name for the park, and I was happy to see that his name was chosen. It makes me happy to drive by there and to see that land and in his name there, and to see the kids using that trail and walking to school. It'd be sad to see buildings put up there and their playgrounds being closed in more, and then looking at more buildings instead of pretty green fields and grass. So that makes me sad. It seems that the $1.4 million is a drop in the bucket just to fix something temporarily, because it may continue to get worse, and I hate to see land taken that we can never get back again. That's it.
Ms. Terry Davis?
First, I want to say thank you. I know you're trying your hardest to make things right for a situation that you did not invent. However, my kids grew up at this school. They graduated from the school. We used to live right across the street when that was a park over there. It was open. Everybody came and they utilized it. They have the park over here now, and it's absolutely beautiful. Statements that have been made about you can't make land come back again once you build a building, and then it gets shut down. Because if you go up and down Manatee Avenue, there's a lot of buildings that people sold. They opened up and they shut down. They opened up and they shut down. The safety of the children. When my kids went to school here, they were kicking bums out because they were sleeping here underneath the building. They were getting behind the fences. They built the Walgreens. The school had to go in lockdown I don't know how many times because there was robberies. And now they want to sell it and put another building there that has the potential. I have no idea what they want to put there, but the potential of being robbed, locked down, and it starts again. It's a beautiful piece of property. It seems that in all of the years, they kept building more schools. They redistricted. My kids went from Jessie P. Miller to MSA, and one went to King, and then they both ended up at Southeast. They redistricted to fill the schools at Lakewood Ranch. They redistricted to fill the schools at Braden River. They bus kids. I was in the transportation department for 2 years. I saw kids bus all over this county. There are schools in this county that are underutilized. They are not filled to capacity. And I know that people would be upset if they were shut down. I do remember at one point Mr. Chuck Banks suggested, why not having K-8 schools? The kids would start in kindergarten and finish through 8th grade. You wouldn't have as many problems with the kids because you wouldn't have a middle school situation. I think it's time that the school system started looking at how can we better utilize our school, K-8, and look hard. I know it's going to hurt people's feelings, but you need to shut schools down. And then when you start talking about, well, we have to move kids for this block because they're the socioeconomic status, it has to go all the way out to Lakewood Ranch or wherever they have to go because you have to have a minority children there. I know the children that I work with, who are a lot of low-income, socioeconomic status children, deprived, would love to go to the school in their neighborhood and not be bused an hour and a half to another school. I think it's time, and if you have to spend money on an attorney, because I think Arizona did it, and there's several other, Arkansas, where they fought the federal government on the fact that it's better to make our schools equal than to have them bust all over the county or bust all over the state. So seriously, you need to look at combining schools. You could combine Wakeland and Johnson Middle School and make that an IB school, K through 8th grade. You start right there, and then you'd open up that school for the kids in that neighborhood who are being bused out to Gulette Elementary. And I know they're on that bus for over an hour and a half sometimes. That's all I'm saying. It's time to look at shutting down schools and getting your millions of dollars that you need. 1.4 million or 1.8 million doesn't make a darn bit of difference. And you yourself have said it's fixing a short-term problem, putting a long-term problem out there in selling a piece of land and building a building and taking the land.
I appreciate the comment. Just to reiterate, I mentioned earlier about commissioning a RFP and having expertise of a team come in and do that very thing that you just said. We need to do that. We need to look at our boundaries. We need to look at our undercapacity schools, our schools that are over capacity or growing to over capacity. We need to do all of that and look at that. And how do we redistrict, reboundary? What is our capital outlay needs for expanding in existing campuses, adding new schools in the county? That all needs to be done and will be done, and we're moving forward with that. So I do appreciate that. I will tell you, having been in Chicago for 10 years, closure of a school is a big issue. And when you close a school down, you get a community turnout probably much greater than you see tonight. That has to be done thoughtfully. It has to be done properly. It has to be done with community engagement. It has to be done with articulating and communicating to the community that the district has done everything possible to make the school feasible around increased enrollment and the programs that were put in there and the academics to allow that to happen. So that is very much of a challenging issue in school districts. That is why we are going to commission this proposal, this RFP, and get experts in here to help our team to identify and come up with a plan around all that.
Misty Phillips.
I'm going to try to read this. I'm not good at.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm going to try to read this on my own. If I can't, he's going to finish. Obviously, the safety of the kids is the biggest thing. Whether you do that, have 1, 2, 3, 4, it doesn't matter. You can't control who's going to come in and out of that. That's not fair. The way that it goes. We don't want an east and west entrance. This school was built for safety. There's one entrance, there's one exit. That's why. They can see who comes in and who goes out. Manatee High School has a brand new football field. They have a brand new locker room. We invest in schools and take away from schools that this is all we have. I have also lived right down the road. I now live right across the street. My friends that I've grown up with, I see lots of faces in here. I went to Manatee, but we're investing in schools that don't need much more investment. They're flying their players to play first games, and you want to take away trees of dead officers? That's not right. It's just not right. And then taking, 3, my biggest question on 3, you're going to take away our park and build a park? Can someone explain that?
It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't to build a park.
You're going to enhance it then?
Yeah, the existing one.
For who?
The existing part.
For the public?
If we could get the county or the city to acquire the property and retain it as a park, to even possibly enhance the existing park.
For who?
For the community here.
For public?
For the community here.
Okay, are they going to be charged to get into this park?
No.
Okay. It's a question I have. It doesn't say. It doesn't make much sense to me. And like everyone else has said, and I feel bad. I feel bad for you guys. It's a position that stinks. But $1.2 million It's just not worth what we've all invested in this school.
Well, just to give you an understanding, when you have the challenges we had, we gave all our teachers a salary increase last year that was state funded. That was $6.3 million.
They deserve it.
They do, absolutely. I agree with you. We decided not to include the principals and the assistant principals as part of that $6.3 million, which they were eligible for, so we could maximize the increase for the teachers. We increased the rest of the employees, except the senior leadership team. There was no increase for them. 2% across the board for the remainder of our employees, because I didn't think it was equitable that everybody should get an increase. And so by doing that, that cost to the district for 2%, I believe, was $1.9 million, correct?
And I'm a parent that on early out Wednesdays and early out Fridays can't even get a job to save money, to give increases. There's a lot that can be done, and it's not taking out that park. That's it.
Thank you.
I have a question from Kelly Balzer. She'd like me to read it. Her question is, can we ask the public to donate $20 each, buy the park, and give it to Miller? It would take $20 a piece for 90,000 people. We could pay for it. Tyler Kukoda?
Could that be a community initiative? Yeah, you can. Another reason why you couldn't do that.
How do I start that ball rolling tonight?
Well, we'll look at that and see the legalities around that.
We'll look at it. We'll look at it. Tyler Kukoda?
What is it that is going to be built that is going to tear down our beloved park?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
What is it that is going to be built that is going to tear down our beloved park?
We really have no idea. When the property would be sold, it would have to go through the city of Bradenton and looked at the current zoning and what the proposal would, and that would basically be determined by the city. Good question.
Yeah, very good question. David Wright?
My name's Dave Wright, and I taught here at Jesse P. Miller for, I guess, about 18 years. And I need a clarification. My understanding that there is an $8.2 million surplus from this past year that you were able to pull up.
Projected surplus.
Projected. My question is that $8.2 million projected surplus is made up of the $4.5 million from the sold properties that were sold this year as well?
Mm-hmm.
So actually, instead of an 8.2 million, there's really about a 3.7 million surplus plus the sale of the property. Is that correct?
Plus the almost $10 million shortfall we had last year.
Okay. And the second question that I have for you is this $10 million fine that we're looking at. Is that a done deal, or is that just a possibility?
I will let Don answer that question because he's the one that talked to the deputy commissioner yesterday about it. Our impression from the conversation that there was a high probability, but the decision had not been made yet, and that we would be notified within 10 days by a letter from the commissioner.
And basically what Mr. Mills said is correct. I have, my team has been working with the State Department on an ongoing basis trying to get closure, as well as the Attorney General's office. And as of yesterday,
Auditor General.
The Auditor General.
I'm not in trouble.
As of yesterday, the status was that they intend to give us a ruling in 10 days. In talking to the informal state monitoring team that's been working with us all year, They are indicating in their plan they're sending back to us that they are putting in the full cost of those findings. And so that's telling us, it sort of gives you a heads up as to what the state is going to do when they send their official report.
Possibly do.
So this seems like the government in action, right? We have a school system who has had a history of having some financial problems over a period of time, and in 1 year's time, they've shown a wonderful move toward taking care of that problem, but they didn't live up quite to it, so we're going to charge them an additional $2 million that they don't have, so they can start $2 million in the hole. Does not compute to me.
Sir,
I hope it does
sir,
to
to be
you.
honest, I've been sitting in my office for the last 2 days scratching my head on that one.
So if you've been working under them and they've been working hand in hand with you, it would seem like step number one would be to try to get a little closer feel for if this $10 million fine does not happen, then the selling of that piece of property with Mr. McKelvey's name on it shouldn't have to happen.
You're right.
Therefore, it seems like, to me, logically speaking, step one would be to find out what's going to happen. If it sells, it's not going to take care of the $10 million one way or the other. I mean, it's not going to change the fine, right? We've already
It won't
said,
change the fine, it'll just
if
help
I
us
said
cover
to
the
you,
shortfall.
I have enough money in my pocket, I don't, I'm a retired teacher, but I would give you this $1.2 million, $1.8 million. By the time it closed, the $10 million fine would already be posted.
I have no plans of bringing forward to the board any decision on this anytime in the immediate future. We're going to know pretty soon where we are in the $10 million.
Okay, then I don't understand why this $10 million and this $1.2 to $1.8 million are in the same context.
You want to explain that, Don?
Okay, the reason they're in the same context. When we get, if the state really does go ahead and charge us the full amount of the fines, and these fines go back to practices the district has had for 5 or 6 years in many cases. So it's paying for previous poor management practice. So we don't have any choice, and there's nothing we can do to change the fines. So if they levy those, then that takes us back into a negative fund balance. This property would only be one of a number of scenarios we would have to look at in order to get back out of the minus and get up to $10 million in order to meet the state minimum requirement. So you're right, selling this property by itself won't solve it. That's why when we did last year's fiscal recovery plan that you mentioned that we sold property, we sold property. We laid off over 80 central office employees. We sold a fleet of white cars, which were service vehicles. We closed down the old MTI campus. We closed down Central High School. We took some pretty drastic steps in order to just be able to get to where we are today. And now because they may come back behind and enforce those penalties, then we're going to be right back to saying, how are we going to raise money and where all can we find it? Because we ran out of places when we cut $21 million this year.
But it all boils down to one little word: if. If.
And that's why.
If.
That's why we're not coming forward with any recommendations to the board until we have clarity around that. But now we have to go back and start building a new budget for next year to cover that shortfall.
If.
We're not disagreeing with you.
Right.
No, we can't appeal fines.
No.
Ms. Christina Kelly?
Thank you for coming in tonight and speaking with us and taking the time. I'm a Manatee County resident, I'm a graduate of Manatee High School of '91, and my husband is a teacher in Manatee County. Believe me, I understand how the last year has gone with my husband being a teacher. This is a temporary solution to an ongoing problem of money mismanagement. Have we exhausted everything before we take this step? The same evening that you listened to some of the Manatee County residents a couple weeks ago come out to speak against the selling of the park, I believe that was the same evening that you all approved hiring an elementary education coordinator for elementary schools in the tune of a salary of $90,000 plus per year. We have been operating, from what I understand, without one for, I don't know, a year maybe? I don't know if it's been longer. So why now? I also understand that we are in the middle of changing all over from MAC to complete PC within the whole school district. I don't know if that's true or not, but that seems to be another expense to me. There are schools that are empty in this county or not full. There are schools that are over capacity, that it's cheaper for us to pay the fine instead of paying for a new teacher to come in. There are a lot of things that our district needs to look at. So I'm just asking that we ask the state to take responsibility as well for not monitoring your budget and to make sure that we just exhaust everything before we take these drastic measures. Thank you.
All very good points. When this team got on board, we had to reorganize the school district around meeting the core functions of a school district that was not in place in the past. So we brought to the board a new organizational structure that included 3 executive directors that would have portfolio of schools. So the one position you're referencing that has been recently placed is the position you're talking about. That position, the money was encumbered to that position last summer in our budget, but we did not fill it throughout the year because, one, filling positions during the school year is challenging. So we decided to wait until the spring to interview. And so all that money that was encumbered went into that $8.2 million surplus. And Diana Green, remarkable lady, picked up those schools and managed those schools as well as doing her job as the Deputy Superintendent of Instructional Services to save that money. So that went to the $8.2 million. We have another vacant position that became vacant, like position last fall when Mary Murray left and moved with her husband to Oklahoma. That position has been vacant because that encumbered money went to the $8.2 million surplus, and now we're moving forward with filling that position by a person who will start at the end of June, mid-end of June. So that cost will be no cost to the district out of this year's budget virtually. The other person that we hired is a very fine elementary school principal, and so the salary bump from that to that level is a small amount over a couple of months going into that position. But then the encumbered money for the principal position that she fills will be available for surplus into our general fund balance. Does that make sense? So we are actually managing this to that level where we're being mindful to enhance the surplus at the end of the budget year around these vacant positions where the money's already been put in the position, but it's not spent, then it goes into our surplus. And a lot of people have taken on additional responsibilities to help us get there. Dr. Diana Green did a phenomenal job this year. She managed all the elementary schools and did her job as well. And so we all did that to save money. We have other positions at the district level staff that have not been filled or staffed, but the money was encumbered for that position that went to the $8.2 million surplus. So what I'm saying is there are a lot of people in central office picking up additional jobs and responsibilities for us to save money to meet that fund balance.
Ina Baden.
I do appreciate y'all coming to listen to us, and I hope you can hear what we have to say. I believe that when this new school was built, now I could be incorrect, I believe it was, Jesse P. was led to believe that it would always remain a park. That's why it was named in honor of someone, and it's not going to do the trick. I've got a daughter and a son-in-law that work for the school board, and there is still a lot of waste in the school board that could make up additional monies. And I know that you closed Central High School, but were the teachers, or Central School, was that in this year's budget as well as last year's for those teachers, or was it left out again?
No. What we did was, I looked at all options to save money for that $21 million, the team and I. We looked at Central High School, which is an alternative school for graduation. We were spending $2.5 million to operate that school. And we were graduating the last class 11 students.
Yeah.
That is $170-some thousand per diploma.
Right.
So we closed it. And
But were the teachers budgeted for in that budget?
There was 1 to 2 teacher allocations sent to all the schools to pick up those students going back to the high schools. And we came out in October and had to make an adjustment to our budget because that was not initially included. Okay. But the overall cost savings of closing that school, I believe, was somewhere around $1.5 million.
Okay. And have you considered selling the administration building?
Yes, we have. I'm going to tell you right now, and Don's going to tell you this. 2 months ago, I called the senior leadership team and I said, we need to look at the option of closing one of the 2 buildings, the SSC, the PSC. I'm going to allow him to give you a summary because we did the math on the numbers, consolidation. If we were to move out of the SSC into the PSC on 63rd Street, we would ultimately have to expand that building, build a dais in a boardroom, et cetera. And that would probably be $2 to $3 million. We even looked at possibly acquiring the old Bradenton Herald building across the street, but it was actually smaller than what we needed for our existing space. So Don, you want to add anything to that? We did a deep analysis around it.
I was going to say, there's not much to add. He has covered it all. But we did look at it very carefully. We tried to look at other options as to buildings that are available that would be able to house the number of employees that are distributed between the various centers. And we have not identified any that we could buy. We could probably get around $5 to $6 million if we sold the building down on Manatee. But everything we've looked at so far would mean we'd have to add a construction project in order to do that, and you lose a lot of your profit in doing so. And then it wouldn't be central to the district anymore, because if we went to the PSC, you're really in Sarasota. So we've had a lot of concerns from community members voiced around that. And I think that's the most challenging part of issues like this. What's really important to one group and is a real problem, to another group, they don't see that as a problem. And then they'll have an issue, and that will be a big issue, and then another group won't have that. And that's always that balancing act we're having to do as senior leadership, because we do have to look at the entire county, not just one community. So we do understand the passion and position that you're in, but I guess we would ask in return to try to understand that we have to look at the entire county and try to figure out how to solve those kinds of problems. But I do appreciate your question.
Well, the reason I ask this is because you do have to gain the public's trust back, because I have spoken to the school board on numerous occasions when I feel that something's not going right. Several years ago, I came to them about purchasing $600,000 worth of office furniture that they didn't know what they were going to do with. I suspect it's either been sold as surplus or something. I said it's worth about $30,000. And it wasn't Mr. McDonegal, it was before then. And I said,
How long ago was that, ma'am?
well, it was the superintendent, Dr.
What, about 10, 15 years ago?
No,
Oh.
no. It was about, how long ago was Mr. McDonegal in?
I believe 3, 4 years ago.
Right. So it was probably about 5 years ago, about the time all the trouble started. And I said, it's worth probably, I am a personal property appraiser, and I told them at the time, I said, they would not get $30,000 for that furniture if it went on the open market. They went right ahead and voted. So it hasn't been too long that it has been mismanaged. So this is why we are so concerned. And you are going to have to gain the public's trust back, because there have been a lot of mistakes, and it wasn't just the previous administration. It's been several. But
Well,
within that 6-year time frame.
It is very much my goal to restore the public trust in our school district.
Well,
And we have to do that in many ways. First, by transparency. Second, by engaging the community in the decision-making process and feedback and input, which is very much what we're doing this evening. That's the second thing we need to be doing. But again, we have to be good fiscal stewards of the taxpayers' money, and we haven't been able to do that up until recently.
No. Mr. Miner was there the night that I told them that that was a very bad expenditure. But thank you for the time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Rodney Smithley.
Thank you, folks. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I'm Rodney Smokey Smithley. I'm very political about this situation. I had about a 30-minute speech prepared to tell you why that should not be sold. Most everybody here has said what I was going to say, so there's no sense in me to repeating it. So I'm going to go to the end of my speech. Now, I will let you know, my wife and I, Patty, we've been in this Woodmere subdivision for over 40 years. I don't think anybody else has lived that long in this area right here. So this is dear to my heart. If we need money for this kind of stuff, didn't a few years back, 20 years back, didn't we have an election on voting the lottery into Florida, the lottery system? That was supposed to help all the schools in Florida. They're collecting millions and some months billions of dollars on that lottery. Why isn't that helping to take care of when a county is having problem with needing money? Even if we can borrow it from them, and then when the county gets better and we have money coming in, we can pay it back. What I just don't understand why our politicians in Florida and even higher up, they get things passed and then it falls right through the cracks and it's not used for what it's supposed to be used for. I know where the money's going in the lottery, but I'm not getting into that because it's too political. But that was what was going to be the end of my speech. Thank you for listening, folks.
Thank you.
Scott Lipinski. Scott Lipinski.
I'd like to know who at the state level that decides the fine or the penalty that they're going to assess, or who are the people, should we contact them and to voice our opinion? Exactly who is that?
Very good question, sir. I would suggest we've been in constant contact with our elected officials here, Senator Galvano, State Representative Boyd, State Representative Stubbe, That would be an option, or you could write a letter directly to the Commissioner of Education, Pam Stewart. I just came from a Chamber of Commerce directors meeting and explained the situation to them, and they intend to write letters to the governor and the commissioner.
Mickey Ryan.
Hi, my name is Mickey Ryan, and my grandfather graduated from Bradenton High, my mother from Manatee High. I went to Miller, Walker, and Manatee, so I'm vested in this community. Coach McKelvey was my coach when I was here at Miller. The park here on this side of town is terrific. It's really nice, a nice vista up here. If you as a district sell this, you don't know what's going to go there, but it's going to be commercial. If it gets the future land use change done, the zoning done, and the site plan approved. But that's also going to increase the traffic out here that's already probably at failing. It's adopted a level of service of D with the county already, and it's a nightmare trying to turn left out of the shopping center here. And another business over here is just going to make that worse. Now, I have an option for you, sort of a modification of number 3.
Okay.
In this day and time, there's a lot more governments getting together, crossing the boundary lines, rolling up their sleeves, and sitting down and fixing problems. Maybe the county or the city has a piece of property. They would trade you for this, that you could sell and make your money. But you have to sit down with them, have a council of governments meeting, have the people in the room that can make those decisions, have your staff planners there because that's what you need, the people there that can tell you if it's going to work or not. So instead of selling this beautiful site, look to see if the county or city has a surplus piece that they'll swap you for. You can leave it as a park and sell theirs.
Mr. Gallo, would you like to answer that on behalf of the city?
You have a you have a county commissioner here too for this district.
I'll
so.
ask Mr. Chaffee next.
While it's a good idea, there is some negativism as far as revenue for the city or the county. When the city normally does surplus land, if we are going to sell surplus land, we put a little bit of a kicker in it. Otherwise, if a developer wants to buy the surplus land, we ask them to do things like maybe if they have property that's already in the city, ask them to annex into the city if they're contiguous to us, so we start generating revenue. We're not in a position to give anything away. We struggle with our budgets. One of the things that really needs to be understood tonight, and it may put a lot of peace in everybody's heart, and Mr. Mills, I know you're aware of it, because the mayor told me that he did discuss it with you. The property in question is zoned for schools only. Nothing can be built there. No commercial property, no residential property, unless the city of Bradenton, the 5 council people, not the mayor, but the 5 council people, vote to change that zoning. So consequently, the person that is made you an offer, if he does his due diligence, if he's smart and a good businessman, he's going to pull that offer off the table as quick as you can shake a stick, because he's going to see the flavor of what's going on in this community, and he knows that the city government, more than likely, I can't speak for them because it would be against the law on a zoning change, would not approve a zoning change in this beautiful school.
Let me, I would like for the record to stipulate that the conversation that Mayor Poston had with me, I shared earlier this evening with the audience. Commissioner, did you want to comment at all? I don't want to put you on the spot, but. Commissioner Chaffee, please, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple things, since you put me on the spot, but I came here to listen. I'm not in favor of selling that property either. It's about the school system, but it's about the community too, big time about the community that surrounds this whole area. With regards to Manatee County, we're looking at selling surplus property too, but we've cut over $60 million since '07. We're still getting out of our, we're still borrowing about $17 million. It's supposed to go down over the next few years, but you know, we have a lot of challenges just like the county, or just like the city does. I understand the situation you're in, but you know, you're talking about if you're fined. You know, I don't see why you're pulling the trigger right now. Or well, you're not pulling the trigger, but I would think that you would have the answers to some of these questions before you come to the people here and tell us what you think you're going to be doing. And that's where I'm having little problems with this whole situation. I mean, people are very upset about it. You know, I've been here 40 years. I'm into my 40th year. I didn't have the pleasure of going to school here, but I went to school in a community like this. And Jesse P. Miller is so vital to this neighborhood, this community, and that piece of property out there is a big part of it. So,
thank you.
Since Mike is making his way back, I'm going to do the next one. Jennifer Tratz.
I think the lingering question has been, what are they going to put there? And nobody seems to know the answer to that. You say it's up to the city of Bradenton and zoning. I've worked for contractors. I am smart enough to know that companies don't come in and cause a ruckus and offer $1.8 million for a piece of property that they don't know what they're going to do with. And I think somebody knows. And what's going to happen when the city of Bradenton zones it and the school board says, well, that wasn't our fault, that was up to the city? How are the children going to be protected by what they possibly put there? What security measures are going to be enforced?
When we sell surplus property and sell it, the board reviews and stipulates specifically in the contract what we want to make sure it's not sold as. As far as zoning, that is a city matter on the zoning, and I did talk to the mayor, and he pointed out adeptly that I confirmed that this is single residential property, but it would be up to the city council to vote one way or the other if it were to be rezoned. So that's a decision at that level.
I have a question from Donna Gerner who would like for me to read it. She says, how would the district save, how much money would the district save by not ordering new textbook series for a year? We seem to have to renew textbooks every 5 years when the teachers have just learned the system, and then they're told that they have to start over, good, bad, or otherwise. She also says, I was a teacher for 38 years. My salary was only $60,000, so it's not the teachers that are getting all the money.
I will answer the question about instructional materials. That is a categorical funding, and categorical means when we receive it, it is the only thing you can spend that money on. With the new Florida Common Core standards starting next year, our current textbooks are not aligned to those standards. So we are required every 5 to 6 years to purchase the state-adopted material. Last year, they did put that adoption off. They put it off for a year. You're allowed 1 year's grace. So this upcoming school year, we are required to buy, for K through 5, a new reading textbook. But those categorical dollars must be spent on instructional materials, and there is a statute that we are required to provide core textbooks for every student in our district.
What do you do with the old textbooks?
We will look at the condition. You can resell old textbooks depending on if you have a company that is interested in purchasing those books.
Catherine Hughes. She asked, did Ms. Aranabar ever take the pay cut from 2012?
Ms. Aranabar, did you hear the question? Can you? I couldn't hear you. Did everybody hear that?
I was the only board member that took a 7% pay cut because that's what we did to our teachers. And I wasn't going to put a donation to something and get a tax write-off. So I am the only one. Now, you probably read headlines that were different, but I also ran for this office in 2010 fully knowing where our district was going. And not many people want to come to the party when the money's gone and the hard decisions need to be made. But I did it because of the teachers and the investment that they made in my children. And I didn't. I was not born here. I'm not a first or any generation Manatee County person. But I chose this place to raise my children. And from the moment my children entered kindergarten, which was within 12 months of moving here, I've been dedicated and volunteering in this community. My heart is here. My children are now in college, and I'm still here. And I'm here when the fun part is gone. And I'm here because for the first time in 4 years, the budget wasn't balanced by cutting teacher pay. And that's what we did for 3 years. So, and as of right now, I'm the lowest paid board member on the board because I did not take the last year's increase.
I'd like to ask at this moment, a lot of the questions seem to be similar in nature. Is there anybody that has a burning desire to ask their question if they have not had it answered yet?
This school, Jesse P. Miller. Oh, my question? Well, I have to make a little statement before I ask the question. First of all, I heard that this district had spent a lot of money, but this school, Jesse P. Miller, has a principal that is a visionary. These seats that you're sitting on, the children in this school had a walkathon. The vice principal of this school passed away. They had the walkathon to create this that we sit on, that was so easy to put together for you to sit on. They did another walkathon this year. The little ones just had a limousine ride because they created and they raised and they worked hard to get the money to put together. We have a wonderful new vice principal, Mrs. Benton. She works hard. The teachers work hard in here. So Mr. Dunn, he's very innovative to try not to come to you to ask for money that he knows that you're not going to give him. And that we, in this community, as a grandmother, my grandson is in grade 1. I'm not a person that was raised in Bradenton. I'm a foreigner. But my grandson, he's an American. I will soon become a citizen. I'm proud to say that I will be. Jesse P. Miller. Jesse P. Miller was chosen. I prayed to God to give me a school that my grandson will be proud of. I take care of a young man with a disability for 9 years, never knowing that his father Dr. Archie Smith III, retired major, worked for the Surgeon General, went to this school, Jesse P. Miller, when it was the old school up at the front. That little boy he held in his arms as a baby is his eyeball. He is so proud to know that Jeremy's going to school here at the school he went to. When Jeremy was doing his walkathon, you just mentioned talk to Mr. Stubbe. He's a personal friend of mine, so I will be talking to him. Mr. Stubbe was molded by Mr. Bill Partridge, who also adores my grandson. He's a very wealthy attorney in Sarasota. He also gave money to my grandson for this school because he knows he's doing well and he wants him to grow strong, to have Jesse P. Miller a good school. So that park out there, my grandson, when he was collecting his money, he says, I said, what's it for? He says, Grandma, it's for us to have good stuff out there in the park, for us to have for our playground. He says, and I don't like playing in that hot sun, so I want to make a lot of money so that we can have shade. He said, and I love our trees. And he has asthma, and he gets overheated. He goes into an asthma attack. So I enjoy my baby. I love him with all my heart. And I told him whatever he made, I would match it. And I did. So my question to you, sir, after I said so, is why Jesse P. Miller?
Well, I'm going to have Don answer that question, but it really has to do with what surplus potential property that we have available to cover this deficit. That's really it in a nutshell.
But
and
why are we paying for you, not yours? And listen, I have to say to you, welcome to the community. And I'm sorry that we are here to attack you. We're not really here to attack you. You've been
I'm not feeling attacked at all. This is
You've been put into
participation
a
by our
position
citizens.
that has you inherited it. So I would not want to walk in your shoes, really. But suffice it to say, we're not selling that property. Put it that way. So you better start looking, shopping somewhere else.
Okay, I have Andrew Donahue would like to read a question.
When we go outside, hold on. When we go outside on the playground. Can I start it all over?
You can start anytime you want.
When we go outside on the playground, we will have to look at dumpsters.
I couldn't quite understand the question.
The question was, why when we go outside on the playground will we have to look at dumpsters?
Look at what?
Dumpsters.
Good question, young man.
Great question.
Actually, what I proposed in that option, if we were to move forward with that option, we would put a 8-foot fence around it, so you would not see anything but that nice fence.
Does that answer your question? Okay, good job. Yes, please.
My name is Joan Hill. I've lived here since 1968. Well, I won't go into my history. Thank you very much, Mr. Mills, for presenting a very excellent overview of things I did not understand. And to your team, you have inherited a mess, not of your doing. What I want to see happen is what you don't want to see happen. I want the state down here. And I want you to have the pleasure of their company for a year, to look at the school board and to look at everything. I had an agency where I've been funded by the state and federal government, and we had the happy pleasure of having them too. But in the end, it makes things better because things have been going on in this community in a very deep-seated manner for too darn many years. And it's time the state came in. And I would advise every taxpayer here to write to the state and request that that happen. I know it's not a pleasant experience, but we need it, and we don't need to be worried about selling parks.
Well, I very much appreciate that statement, ma'am. I believe that we have the right leadership team in place, the board, the senior leadership team, to be able to handle and cope with this problem on our own without any intervention on the state. But if that was determined and decided by the state, the community, whatever, we would welcome in a collaborative spirit to move forward and move this district and continue that in the right direction.
My name is Steve Motkowitz. I'm a teacher in Manatee County School District, and I've sat on the committee that interviewed the superintendent when he was applying for the job. And I would like to commend him for coming out here and listening to us all today. And I would also like to make a personal plea to you all, and that is that everything that this man has promised us in his interview of what he would do at this district to change things and bring us back on the right course, he has stuck to that. What he promised the teachers, that he would give us raises again, which I did not have a step for 3 years, he provided. Issues that have to be dealt with as far as security, safety, he has put the committees together, and he's done what he said. I know that he's in a very difficult position, and he's here to listen to us, and I fully believe that his intention is to do what's best for this district and for this community. What I think the issue here is, what we're all talking about is a quality of life issue. Mr. Mills, you know what Chicago's like. Imagine selling part of Lakeshore Drive. We all know that would change the whole quality and the look. If there was a shortage of money and Chicago said, we're going to sell the part of Lakeshore Drive across from Buckingham Fountain, it would ruin that. That's what people are here for, and that's what they're looking for. I'm just asking you to find any way you can to find the money somewhere else and to save this park, because once it's gone, it's more urban than ever. And we know what happens when something becomes way too urban and there's no room for kids to play or anywhere to go. The question I have also is, what is going on with MTI's old property? Is there any chance for that to be sold or leased in some way to IMG? That's where I'll leave it. I trust you, I believe in you, and I know you're going to do the right thing.
Thank you. Part of the sale of the Caruso State 70 parcel included a small parcel of the corner there on the old MTI campus at 34th Street there. So that was part of a package parcel that was sold, and we close on that on the 28th. In having discussions with the county administrator and other developers, we're going to see a pretty substantial development in the southwest corridor down there by Bayshore High School, that old MTI campus, and we're probably going to have to use the rest of that property to build probably a K through 8 school. Again, that'll come out of the analysis that I'm having this team come in and do. But if we were to sell that property, we may find ourselves in about 2 years having to find other property to put that school on to meet our needs of the growth there.
Good evening. Good evening, Dr. Mills, distinguished panel and guests.
I think the only doctor up here is Dr. Green.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor. Dr. Green's the only doctor
Okay,
here. But
well,
that's
Mr. Mills.
Thank you.
My apologies, Dr. Green also, distinguished panel. My name is Eddie Copeland. I'm a lifetime resident of Manatee County. I also worked in the school system for a number of years. I'm also vested in the school system. I live in the city of Bradenton at this time, And I know when I was in the system, we used to use the park here for school physical activities like volleyball and different things like that. Now I noticed they took the racquetball court out when it was over here before they built the new school. Okay, that's gone. Now I guess I'm understanding that you want to take the park away also. And I know you mentioned earlier, and some of the other guests mentioned earlier, that the park maybe try to be sold to the city or county. You're hoping they would come in and maybe pitch in. And I didn't hear you mention, though, that if you did try to sell it to the city or county, that it would be contingent of them keeping it as a park to enhance it.
You want to answer that, Don?
Well, first off, on option number 3, we are already talking with some of our counterparts in the county and city government, and we understand there's different perspectives on both government agencies as to whether or not that's even a viable option. But if we were to enter into some type of agreement of that type, the intent would be to keep it as a park, but it would be owned by the county or the city rather than the school district. But it's way too premature to say that that's possible because there's a lot of challenges the city's facing and the county's facing as well. But that's why we do put it up as an option, because we are having those discussions.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
At this time, is there anybody else that would like to?
Hi, my name's David Brady. I have a comment and a question. One, do you guys think about future people that are going to donate property to the school and the county system when you turn around and you get rid of property that's been donated because it's not being used for what they meant it for? And my other comment is I want to thank Barry because he's one of the best guys I've ever seen run a school. And the last thing I want to say is you might want to think about maybe shaving 1% off the salaries on that 5th floor up there, and that might cover the money that we're missing as well. That's all I need to say.
Well, I will say that we gave a pay increase to everybody but on the 5th floor this past year.
I want to compliment Mr. Mills and the panel. They have done an excellent job this evening explaining the budget problems of the school system. I've stayed abreast of them pretty well in the news, but the news doesn't always tell the truth. And I think they have done an excellent job this evening. One thing I'd like to emphasize to everybody in here: call your senators, your representatives, Department of Education about this $10 million possible fine. That will make $10 million for our school system if they can waive it or postpone it. It won't cost us but a few cents individually, but that's worth $10 million to the school system. Think about that.
Thank you.
I've got a comment and a question. Basically, I've lived in this community for a long time. I went to Miller. My son goes here. And I don't want to see the park go, but I've also been involved in manufacturing for 30 years. Now, in manufacturing, we look at lean manufacturing to try to reduce costs and become as efficient as possible. And everything I see tonight from the comments, you're looking at a short-term solution. What are you doing as a long-term solution? Because a short-term solution doesn't get you anywhere except for right now. Long-term is what is going to make it successful, or is it going to break you?
So the $20 million fiscal recovery plan we implemented would have allowed us to balance our budget and to meet the 3% statute of our reserve. Had we been able to execute that to fidelity, we would have went into next budget year not having to make that up as a deficit, per se. Long-term, I think I mentioned, we collectively, as a county, citizens of Manatee County, really need to look at our funding here of our school district and make some hard decisions around potential increases of millage, extending the sales tax, because we are going to see growth. We are going to see a need for expansion of schools, both on campuses and new schools. And I've already mentioned that Sarasota funds their school district at $40 million more than we do, with 11,000 less students than we have. So those are the more long-term solutions we need to be looking at.
And I understand those things, but how are you going to become more efficient? How are you going to reduce your real costs? You know, those, I don't hear anything about becoming more efficient. Every organization I've seen can trim some fat someplace. And
we trimmed $20 million of fat.
And what did that consist of, other than selling some properties, selling some cars and stuff?
On the slide, I presented about 8 different things that we did, but we have an extensive fiscal recovery plan that was inclusive down to how we saved $25,000 around doing this. We actually implemented a very aggressive energy saving program that we projected would return us $500,000 this year towards our revenue per se, and we actually have exceeded, I believe, now $1 million, correct? Not quite, but we're getting there. So we've done really the fat cutting.
What are you doing to become more efficient at what you're doing?
Well, I'm going to let Michael talk about that. Some of the things that have in the past that have allowed us to get there. We didn't encumber our payroll. Most school districts, the payroll, human capital side of a school district is about 80 to 83% of the cost of a school district. If you break it down further, the discretionary funding of a school budget is a very small percentage out of 100%. So a large portion of a school district's budget is human capital. And for us, I believe it's around 80%, correct? Did you want to add anything else to that? Question?
Since I'm being put on the
here to
spot.
answer questions.
That is correct. You know, 80% of our budget is salary, wage, and fringe. And most of that is in the schools. We've, as Mr. Mills mentioned, we've cut utilities. We implemented a position control system to control salary, wage, and fringe spending. You know, most of the efforts that I put in the budget and to bring visibility is really just around cost control, having a real balanced budget, and we're also looking at several other initiatives as well from a lean perspective.
Okay. Thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave, Watchdog Miner, and thank you. I thank you, Mr. Mills, for coming, and staff. I also want to thank all the parents and other members of the community for coming here, so I'm going to give you an applause, okay? Thank you. It shows an interest that we need. Mr. Mills talked about democracy, and that's what it's all about, for making our children better through democratic means. I looked up these options that Mr. Mills provided to us. I can tell everybody here that I'm inalterably supportive of number one. I think this has been a distraction to even think about selling this property that is an integral part of Miller. I'm disappointed that really it's even brought up. I think that the energy that's gone into even talking about it could have been used for better options. That is, to what extent have we actually gone into name leasing rights to get money on a continuing basis? I'm not aware of any effort, you know, that the district has done. I brought this up, Mr. Mills, and I think you said, well, I didn't know if we could do that. I don't know why we can't do that. Do you know?
Actually, we will look into that because we've gone to Orange County and they've done a lot of initiatives around that. Steve looked at it and did an analysis around that, of those kinds of things.
I brought it up almost a year ago. Nothing had been done.
Well, actually, we did that almost what, 6 months ago?
It hadn't been brought to the board as to how much.
Well, one of the things that we are bringing to the board is putting up electronic billboard over there on 63rd, on the corner there, that would generate about $100,000 of revenue a year. So we are looking at those things.
Okay, well, I'm glad that it's not up there as an option. There's a lot of things. It could be the Pat Neal school board building downtown. I mean, Tropicana pays a lot for the stadium naming rights in St. Petersburg. We haven't done that. You know, it's been talked about. You know, how do you make it a continuing? And I just think that you know, selling this is just bad. It's a no starter from the beginning. I'm wondering, you know, to what extent we have gone into the, you know, sale and lease back. We are in this district, you know, basically leasing and having bonding back a lot of our properties. What about downtown? If we need the injection of cash, you know, there's a lot of business that's specialized. There's a lot of tax benefits for businesses engaged in this. We haven't even tried that or thought into that, but we don't have it on an impossible option up here. Instead, we're thinking about destroying one of the great amenities in this community. Over 100 trees out there, many with historical implications, a lot of emotional connections. We're trying to build trust. The gentleman just talked about why would a community trust a board, trust an administration that doesn't fulfill its moral commitments?
Well, Mr. Minor,
yeah.
if I could.
Yes.
I believe that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Well,
we're trying to move this school district as a whole and meet the challenges of the district and try to figure out ways. Tonight is all about hearing from the community and what the concerns are. And this is the process that we referenced earlier on.
Okay, well, I don't really feel, you know, that even bringing it up it reflected the trust that this community deserves, you know, from the board and the administration. I'm telling you that flat out. And I think the reason people are here is that they don't feel that the board and the administration really has respected that trust that people have given in the past.
I'm not speaking for people here, but we are here in the name of building trust.
Okay, well,
and that is,
well,
had we slipped this on the board a couple of days for an agenda for a vote, I would completely understand why the community would not trust it.
Okay, well,
but we went through a very deliberate process of allowing the community to come to a board meeting after it was workshopped. I've come out here tonight. It's not even gone before the board for a vote. I think it's all about trying to build trust through collaboration and getting feedback and input and making a decision after you engage the community and hear what their concerns are.
Okay, well, I hope that you've heard everybody almost unanimously here tonight say
Minor,
that.
I've been here since, what, 6:30?
Okay, sir, I think you've heard them say, you know, you don't sell this. It's an invaluable resource. We've heard a speaker earlier talk about, you know, selling Lakefoot or, you know, the waterfront in Chicago. The people in New York, when they had financial crisis, they didn't talk in terms of selling off Central Park or part of it. It wasn't put on an agenda. It wasn't put on a workshop. That was sacred land. This is sacred land out here, and I hope we never again hear about it's even being considered for sale. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. I'm just a parent here at the school. I have a question. At the beginning of the year, we had to wait several weeks to get approval from the school board and the city for the resource officer, the police officer, to do traffic. So if you do settle for 2 or 4, can you bump up the sale price a little bit to ensure that the funds will be available for that police officer to be out there for the safety of parents and children leaving? Because if you opt for 2 or 4, the increased traffic is going to be a nightmare without it. Back to school night this year was packed. There's no more parking, so we park. The funeral home is gracious enough in the bank. We park at the bank. I was walking my children across 43rd after back to school night. I had just stepped foot on the property, the bank property, when another parent got T-boned, and I had pieces of car flying at me. So now if you opt for 2 or 4, there's just going to be increased traffic. So bump up the sale price to include monies for that officer so that we don't have to wait weeks to get that officer. So that's a concern I have from that. I'm going to share with you, I host a staff appreciation group here. We have no money. We don't ask the school for money, but every month we put together little niceties for the teachers, just to show our appreciation. We have Teacher Appreciation Week next week. Not going to ask the school for any money because they don't have it. They don't have any money to give us, but that's fine. So in the past week, I've reached out to the community, and in 3 days, I have a little over $600 to give to our teachers in different events for next week. So I encourage you, keep reaching out to the community, and not just in these forums, maybe reach out to IT people in the private sector, not maybe people that you would just contract out to come in and give us an analysis. Talk to the graduates that are certified, MIT certified, or electricians or contractors, or the private sector, and say, come and give us your ideas on how we can help our budget. And that way you wouldn't have to pay for it. It's free advice. Contact them and say, how can you help us? Be honest with them and see what they say.
Thank you. Those are good suggestions.
Anybody else? Well, we certainly appreciate Superintendent Mills, board members coming out and talking with us this evening. If there's nobody else would like to make a comment, Mr. Mills, if you'd like to close.
Thank you. First of all, again, I started off with saying this, and I'd like to reiterate. I very much appreciate the community coming out, being active voices, and voices that are heard and listened to as we move forward to turn this district around and move it in the right direction. There has been a tremendous amount of progress made in our school district in the last year. I will tell you, and everybody up here will tell you, that a year ago, this district was total chaos in a catastrophic state. And we widely believe and understand that. And we have had to spend the last year rebuilding the foundation for a great school district, which we've done, and I'm very proud of what we have done collectively as a team, from down at the district office to every classroom in the schools and the staff and faculty at our schools. We have made tremendous progress around that. We have created a fiscal recovery plan that generated $17, $18 million out of cost savings that we articulated and shared tonight. But we are not out of the woods yet fiscally. And I understand your concerns here. I've listened to them. I also understand that we are in a position where we have to take some probably drastic actions to save this school district in our financial future. And so we have challenges around that. And that's responsible leadership. Responsible leadership is sometimes making the tough decisions for the betterment of the whole organization. But I don't want you to think that I haven't come here tonight and my team to genuinely listen to your concerns, engage you as community members, as citizens, as voters, as taxpayers. I truly value that. I spent almost 25 years of my life defending that. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your comments. I guess you're looking for next steps. Right now, we're going to have to go back and probably rebuild a budget if this comes to fruition. And in doing so, we're going to have to look at how we're going to cover that potential deficit around that. So I've heard you. I've listened to you. Thank you for coming. And we'll wait to hear and see what our outcome is around that letter. Thank you.